All right, so let's jump into a story from the Rugby World Cup. You know, a story that really captures the intensity of the whole thing.
Okay.
Remember all the controversy around that quarterfinal match, France and South Africa?
Yeah.
Well, at the center of it all was this clash between two giants of the
Uh,
game,
Well,
Jonathan Danty and Pieter-Steph du Toit.
okay.
And their story really shows us what makes the Rugby World Cup so captivating.
I see. It's fascinating, how this rivalry really gets at the weight of every single moment in a tournament like the World Cup.
Right. And the sources you send over, I mean, they really paint this vivid picture
Yeah.
of how much just one play, and especially a lack of action on that play,
Yeah,
can have a lasting impact.
absolutely. To really grasp this, we need to start by explaining the clear out in rugby.
Okay.
Basically, it's how players try to move opponents away from the ball after a tackle.
Okay.
And it can get pretty physical.
I bet.
So there are specific rules about how it needs to be done, to keep players safe.
Yeah. Makes sense. You definitely don't want anyone getting hurt unnecessarily,
Right.
especially in a sport as physical as rugby.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
So in this situation, Dante believes Du Toit's clear out on him during that quarterfinal uh, was not only illegal but dangerous.
Yeah.
And Dante felt it should have been penalized
Mhm.
and that the referee not doing anything
Yeah.
potentially cost France the game and ultimately the World Cup.
And this isn't just like some random grudge match between these two, right? They have a history.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot more to this story than just that one moment in the World Cup.
Mm-hmm.
This incident was actually a bit of deja vu.
Really?
Back in 2022, they had a very similar run-in.
Hmm.
And Du Toit actually got a red card,
Oh, wow.
which is the most serious penalty in rugby
Yeah.
for a dangerous clear-out on Dante.
So this wasn't their first rodeo.
No.
What happened after that first incident in 2022?
Well, interestingly enough, Du Toit apologized to Dante after that red card. So you can imagine Dante's frustration when, almost the same thing happens again on the biggest stage of all,
Yeah.
in a World Cup quarterfinal. And this time, there are no consequences for Du Toit.
Yeah, that must feel like a huge slap in the face, especially given the context of the World Cup. I mean, it's not just a regular season game.
Right. We have to remember how the Rugby World Cup works. It's a knockout tournament.
Right.
One loss and you're out.
Yeah.
Every match is sudden death. So that kind of pressure
Yeah.
just amplifies every single play.
Yeah.
It's win or go home, literally.
So in that context, Danty feeling like a bad call cost France the game is huge. It's like the weight of their entire World Cup journey all coming down to that one moment.
Exactly. Dante even talks about how vivid that moment still is for him. The moment the Springboks kicked the ball into touch.
Oh, wow.
Signaling the end of the match and the end of France's World Cup hopes. That feeling of what if, it's got to be tough to process.
It has to be. And you know what adds fuel to the fire? World Rugby reviewed that match after the fact.
All right.
And they found 5 major refereeing errors. 5.
Wow. That's right.
Yeah.
And you can only imagine how Dante must felt when he heard that news. It's like having your suspicions confirmed, but too late to change anything.
Yeah.
It validates his feeling that things weren't fair, and it adds a whole other layer to this rivalry.
It's not just about disagreeing on a play anymore, is it?
It becomes about something so much bigger.
Right.
It goes beyond the game itself, touching on fairness, consistency in officiating,
Yeah.
and the impact of those decisions not only on the players, but on their teams and the entire tournament.
Makes you question what it means for a game to be truly fair at that high of a level, you
Yeah.
know? It's easy to just get caught up in the excitement of it all, the spectacle of it all.
Right.
But this deep dive is really showing the human element at play here
Yeah.
and the lasting consequences that can come from these moments.
And it's not just about the outcome of that one match. This incident and the lack of accountability, at least from Dante's perspective, it's created this rift between the two players, a grudge that's just, festered. In fact, Dante has actually said publicly that he wouldn't have a drink with Du Toit even in 10 years.
Wow. That's a powerful statement. It really speaks volumes about how deeply this whole thing has affected him. This is way more than just a simple rivalry on the pitch.
Absolutely.
Mm.
This speaks to something much, much deeper.
Right.
It makes you think about the emotional burden these athletes carry, the pressure they're under,
Yeah.
and how these intense, high-stakes situations can actually shape their relationships
Hmm.
and even their perceptions of the game itself.
It's like we're seeing a microcosm of the whole World Cup experience right here in this rivalry.
Yeah.
It's not just about who wins or loses,
Right.
but the impact of these moments, the lasting impact.
Yeah, and it's not just the physical toll these guys go through.
Right.
These are emotional scars that can stick around long after the final whistle.
Yeah, it really gets you thinking about the mental side of the game.
Right, absolutely.
We always talk about how physical rugby is, but this really highlights that psychological aspect too.
Yeah,
The pressure these guys are under.
yeah. It's crucial to remember that they're playing on the world stage,
Hmm?
representing their countries.
Right.
The weight of expectations, the
Yeah,
national pride, it all adds another layer to this rivalry.
it really does. And Danty's comments about this being a bad memory that will stay with him,
Yeah,
it's almost like a trauma, you know?
that's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
It definitely speaks to the idea that these experiences can leave a mark, a kind of emotional scar that lingers even after the physical stuff is gone.
Mm. And it's interesting to think about it from Du Toit's perspective, too.
Yeah.
I mean, we focus so much on Danty's side,
Right.
but I wonder what was going through Du Toit's head during all this.
That's a great question. Unfortunately, we don't really have access to Du Toit's thoughts directly from these sources, but we can kind of speculate a little based on what he did, you know?
Yeah.
He did apologize after that incident in 2022,
Right?
which suggests he knew that clear out was dangerous.
Right.
But then the fact that something so similar happened again, even if it wasn't penalized, it raises questions
Right.
about intent
Right.
and consistency.
Yeah, like, was it a deliberate tactic on his part or
Yeah.
just an accident, you know, in the heat of the moment?
Yeah.
Tough to say for sure.
It really highlights the challenges referees face in rugby,
Yeah.
especially in a game like this that's so fast-paced and physical. They have to make decisions in a split second
Right.
with huge implications.
Right.
And it's not always easy to know what a player's intention was or if they're really in control of their actions.
It must be so hard to be a ref in those situations.
Yeah.
I mean, the pressure on them is huge, just like it is on the players.
Exactly, exactly. And that's why it's so important to have, a system for reviewing these decisions, holding players and officials accountable. I mean, the fact that World Rugby found 5 major errors
Yeah,
in that match says a lot
it does.
about how officiating can be improved.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder about the impact those other errors had on the game.
Right.
Could France have won even if that clear out had been penalized?
Right.
It's impossible to know,
Yeah.
but it definitely adds to that what if factor
Yeah.
that I'm sure is haunting Danty.
Absolutely. And that's where the emotional toll of all this really becomes clear.
Yeah.
It's not just about losing the game. It's about that lingering feeling of injustice,
Right.
of having victory taken away
Yeah.
by something you can't control.
It makes you think about that line between winning and losing
Yeah.
and how one decision can have such a huge impact.
Right.
Not just on the score, but on the players themselves, mentally and emotionally.
It's a reminder that sport at the highest level, it's not just about physical skill and tactics.
Right.
It's human drama, a clash of personalities.
Yeah.
And how these intense situations can really affect people.
Right. And speaking of clashing personalities, that statement from Danty about not having a drink with Du Toit,
Yeah.
even in 10 years, it really shows just how personal this rivalry has become.
It certainly does. It shows how these things can go beyond the game itself, create this real animosity.
Right.
I mean, it's not just disagreeing over a rule. It's a sense of disrespect,
Yeah.
like a betrayal that's hard to move past.
It makes you wonder if this kind of animosity is common in rugby.
Yeah.
Is this just a unique situation?
Right.
Or does a game this intense just naturally create that resentment?
That's a good question. I mean, rugby is known for its physicality, its aggression,
Right.
but it also has this strong culture of sportsmanship, respect for your opponent.
Mhm.
There's that tradition of players sharing a beer after a match,
Yeah.
win or lose,
Right.
as a symbol of camaraderie,
Mm.
mutual respect.
So for Danty to refuse to do that
Yeah,
really says something about how much this has affected him.
it does. It's like he's rejecting something fundamental to the culture of the game
Yeah.
because of how hurt he feels.
And it's not just about his personal feelings.
Right.
It sends a message to the entire rugby community
Right.
about what he sees as acceptable
Yeah.
on the pitch and what happens if you cross that line.
It's almost like he's saying some things are more important than winning or losing.
Yeah.
Protecting the integrity of the game, holding players accountable. Those things have to come first.
This deep dive is really uncovering a lot more than just a rivalry between two guys.
It is.
It's giving us a look into the core of rugby,
Right.
the values behind it, and the challenges it faces. Balancing those values with the fierce competition today.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah, it's interesting. This one incident, this whole clash between Danty and Du Toit,
Yeah.
it sparked such a big conversation,
Mhm.
about sportsmanship, about officiating, and about how much these high-pressure moments can affect the players.
It really does show you all those layers, beneath the surface of the game.
Right.
I mean, we see how physical rugby is, the athleticism, the skill,
Yeah.
but we don't always see the emotional and mental side of it all.
And it's not just the players either, right? The refs are under a ton of pressure too,
Oh, that's...
making these huge decisions in a split second.
Yeah.
You mentioned those 5 refereeing errors
Yeah.
that World Rugby found in that quarterfinal. What does that mean for the game as a whole?
Well, it definitely raises some questions
Yeah.
about, how effective the officiating is and whether it needs to be reviewed, maybe improved.
Right.
I mean, these referees are human.
Yeah.
They're going to make mistakes, especially in a game as fast and physical as rugby.
But at the World Cup, the stakes are so high.
Exactly.
Those mistakes can have massive consequences.
They really can. And that's why moments like this one, they cause so much debate, so much controversy.
Right.
It's not just about a single bad call. It's about the whole integrity of the game, the fairness, how these decisions impact not just the players, but the fans too.
It's almost like that butterfly effect.
Yeah.
One tiny decision or even not making a decision can have these huge ripple effects.
That's a great way to put it. And in this case, that ripple effect has caused this rift, this grudge between these two players. That hasn't gone away.
Right.
And it started a bigger conversation about officiating, about sportsmanship in rugby.
It really makes you think about what these guys go through.
Yeah.
The human cost of competing at this level.
It does.
We focus so much on the glory, the wins,
It's the highlights.
but we don't often see the emotional toll, what it does to these guys.
This deep dive has really given us a look at that, though, hasn't it?
It has.
We see that raw emotion from Danty, the resentment,
Yeah.
that feeling of injustice he still carries with him.
Mm-hmm.
And it reminds us that these guys are more than just athletes.
Right.
They're people.
They're human, with dreams, with hopes.
And vulnerabilities. It's a side of the game we don't usually get to see.
It adds a whole other level of meaning
Yeah.
to the World Cup, to the whole experience.
It really does. And it makes us, as fans, think more critically about the game. Look beyond the scores, the highlights,
Yeah.
and see the human stories.
This whole deep dive has been really eye-opening. There's so much more to rugby than what we see on the surface. It's got this rich history, these complex rules, such a strong culture.
It does.
But at its core, it's a game played by people. And their stories are just as important as who wins or loses.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
That's the big takeaway from this deep dive.
Yeah.
We've looked at the technical stuff, the controversy with the ref, but in the end, it's the human element that makes this so interesting.
Well said. It seems like we found a lot more than just a rivalry today. This deep dive took us into the heart of rugby. We saw the passion, the pressure, and how it all affects these guys.
It really did. And as we get closer to the next World Cup, let's try to appreciate not just the athleticism, but also those human stories behind it all.
And for everyone listening, next time you're watching a match,
Yeah.
think about the players, the referees, how much weight each decision carries. You might see the game in a whole new way. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep those questions coming, and keep thinking critically.